"Back, you savage!" Silas Reed bellowed, his voice cutting through the quiet Montana morning as he charged toward Kele's camp by the creek. Kele's hands tightened on the leather saddle he was crafting, his blood boiling as Reed grabbed Awee, his frail sister, and hurled her into the icy water. Her panicked cry shattered the air, and in a surge of rage, Kele swung a wooden beam, clipping Reed's shoulder. Shouts and drawn pistols followed, the peaceful creek turning into a battlefield, with Kele branded a fugitive in an instant. Kele, a 28-year-old Crow saddlemaker in 1893 Montana, bears the heavy burden of protecting his sister Awee, whose spirit was broken by horrors at a boarding school. Scorned by white settlers for shunning their mines and questioned by his tribe, he scrapes by to afford Awee's medicine while hiding his forbidden love for Sarah, a compassionate white aid worker, in a town quick to judge. With the scars of his parents' death and a militia clash still raw, Kele now stands at a cruel crossroads. Escape with Awee to shield her from a hateful town or surrender to save her, risking his honor and the chance to expose Reed's sinister scheme to poison the creek and seize Crowland. The sun hung low over the Montana Creek, casting a golden glow on Kele's camp, when a boy from the Crow village sprinted toward him, breathless. "Kele, Sheriff Baxter's coming." "They say you attacked Reed," the boy gasped, eyes wide with fear. Kele's stomach churned as he glanced at Awee, his sister, curled up near the fire, her hands trembling from the morning's chaos. He dropped the saddle he was stitching and knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her pale face. Memories of their parents' death under militia boots flooded back, hardening his resolve to keep Awee safe. He grabbed a worn blanket and a knife, stuffing them into a sack, his hands shaking with urgency. The distant bark of dogs echoed through the trees, signaling Baxter's men closing in. Kele looked at Awee, her soft humming of a crow song breaking his heart, and decided they had to flee. He lifted her gently, whispering, "We'll be okay, Awee, I promise." With the creek gurgling behind them, he led her toward the forest, every step heavy with the weight of being branded a criminal. Awee's frail body slumped against Kele as they stumbled into the forest, her voice looping a crow lullaby, eyes distant and unseeing. Kele's heart ached. The sister who once danced by the creek was now a shadow, broken by the boarding school's cruelty. He tried to soothe her, murmuring, "It's just us now," but she flinched at a snapping twig, her hands clawing at his arm. He remembered the doctor's warning about her needing medicine to calm her panicked mind, a luxury his empty pockets couldn't afford. Awee grabbed his sleeve, whispering about the white ghosts who hurt her, her words slicing through Kele's chest. He found a stream and offered her water, but she pushed it away, muttering, "It's poison." Desperate, he tore a strip from his shirt, tying it around her wrist like a protective charm. When Awee collapsed, clutching her head and sobbing, Kele's throat tightened with fear. He scooped her into his arms, her weight light as a child's, and pressed on, vowing to find safety, even as the forest seemed to close in around them. Sarah slipped through the dawn mist, her basket heavy with bread and a small vial of medicine for Awee. Her heart pounded as she reached Kele's empty camp, the fire cold and the saddle abandoned. She traced their footprints toward the forest, her mind replaying the warmth of Kele's shy smile when he gave her a beaded bracelet months ago. The crack of branches made her duck behind a boulder, her breath catching as she spotted Reed's men in the distance, their voices sharp with hate. She pushed deeper into the trees, her skirt snagging on thorns, until she found Kele and Awee huddled by a pine. Sarah knelt, pressing the bread into Kele's hands and the medicine into his pocket, her eyes pleading. "You have to run farther," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Reed's turning the town against you." Kele's gaze softened with gratitude, but fear flickered as he glanced at Awee, knowing Sarah's kindness could cost her everything. She squeezed his hand, her resolve firm despite the danger, and slipped back into the shadows, praying she'd see them again. Kele sat by Awee in the dim forest, her shallow breaths filling the silence as he weighed his fate. Surrendering to Baxter might spare Awee, but the thought of her in a white man's asylum twisted his gut. He clutched the knife their father gave him, its handle worn smooth, and recalled his words, "Never let them take your spirit." Kele's eyes stung as he counted the coins in his pouch. Barely enough for a meal, let alone a doctor. Awee's soft moan snapped him back, her face pale under the moonlight. He sketched a rough map in the dirt, marking a hidden cave he knew from childhood hunts. Kele slung the unfinished saddle over his shoulder, hoping to sell it later, and whispered to Awee, "We'll find a new home." He carved a small crow symbol into a tree, a prayer for protection, and lifted Awee, her weight, a reminder of his promise. As they moved deeper into the night, Kele's heart battled fear and defiance, refusing to let the white man's law break them. Kele guided Awee through the tangled forest, her steps faltering on the uneven ground. She tripped, tearing her skirt, and Kele paused to knot the fabric, his fingers clumsy with worry. The faint howl of dogs pricked his ears, and his pulse raced, knowing Gideon, Reed's ruthless enforcer, was near. He hoisted Awee across a narrow stream, icy water soaking their boots, her shivers cutting through him. They ducked into a thicket, Kele holding his breath as Awee's fevered forehead burned against his hand. He broke a branch to cover their tracks, his eyes scanning the dark for movement. Awee's soft whimper, "They're coming," sent a chill down his spine. Kele pressed her close, whispering, "I'll keep you safe," and pushed on, the forest a maze of shadows. Each step felt like a gamble, the dogs' barks growing louder, but Kele clung to the hope of the cave ahead, a fragile shield against the world hunting them. Gideon's boots crunched through the underbrush, his 3 men trailing with snarling dogs straining at their leashes. He spat on the ground, muttering, "That crow dog's gonna regret crossing Reed." His torch caught a footprint by the creek, Keel's, and a smirk twisted his face as he waved his men forward. One found a scrap of Awee's torn skirt, holding it up like a trophy, fueling Gideon's rage. He ordered a patch of brambles set ablaze, the crackling flames meant to flush Kele out. A shot rang out, the bullet splintering a tree, a warning to the fugitive. Gideon promised his men a fat purse for Kele's capture, their eyes glinting with greed. They set up a rough camp, sharpening knives and loading rifles, their laughter cold as the night air. Gideon kicked a stone into the creek, imagining Kele's fear, certain the forest would betray the crow man before dawn. Taza, the crow elder, moved silently through the trees, his weathered face set with purpose as he followed Kele's trail. He found him crouched by a stream, Awee's head in his lap, and his voice was stern. "You shamed us, Kele, striking that white man." Kele's jaw tightened, but he met Taza's gaze, explaining Reed's cruelty to Awee. Taza's eyes narrowed, revealing the tribe's split, some ready to hand Kele over to avoid trouble. He pressed a small, bone-handled knife into Kele's hand, his voice low. "Prove you're one of us. Protect our land." Taza warned of Gideon's brutality, a man who once beat a crowboy for sport. He promised to slow the militia's search, but urged Kele to act fast. As Taza vanished into the dark, Keel clutched the knife, the weight of his people's doubt pressing harder than the threat of capture. Sarah's heart raced as she retraced her steps from Kele's camp, the forest alive with the threat of Gideon's men. She froze when a shadow loomed, Gideon himself, his eyes glinting as he snatched her basket. "Helping that savage girl," he snarled, finding the medicine vial. Sarah stood tall, her voice steady, claiming it was for any sick soul. But Gideon shoved her against a tree, her arm scraping bark. He leaned close, breath sour, warning she'd be cast out if she aided Kele again. Sarah's hands shook, but she held his gaze, refusing to betray Kele's hiding place. As Gideon stomped off, she stumbled away, her resolve burning brighter than her fear. She whispered a prayer for Kele and Awee, knowing each step she took for them widened the rift with her own people. Kele led Awee to a cave hidden behind a curtain of vines, the air cool and damp inside. He spread the blanket on the stone floor, easing Awee down, her fevered eyes fluttering shut. Her shallow breaths echoed in the dark, each one a stab to Kele's heart. He lit a small fire, shielding the smoke with his jacket, and carved a crow protection symbol into the cave wall, his fingers trembling. Kneeling by the entrance, he scooped water from a nearby trickle, but its faint metallic smell made him pause. A glint caught his eye, a broken glass vial half buried in the mud, its label faded, but tied to Reed's mine. Kele's chest tightened with suspicion, the creek's purity now in question. He tucked the vial into his sack and sat by Awee, stroking her hair, whispering, "I'll fix this, I swear," as the cave walls seemed to close in, holding their fragile hope. Kele turned the broken vial in his hands, its jagged edge catching the firelight as he studied the faint mine logo. He recalled the village elders' complaints about murky creek water, once clear as glass. Tucking the vial away, he crept to the cave entrance, peering at the stream where dead fish floated, their silver scales dull in the moonlight, his gut twisted, linking Reed's greed to this silent poison. He whispered to Awee, curled on the blanket, about his find, but her soft mumbles gave no reply, her mind lost in fever. Kele resolved to show the vial to Gideon, a crow hunter who knew the land's secrets. The weight of this discovery pressed on him, not just for Awee but for the entire tribe, their lifeblood tied anchor to the creek. He sat vigil by Awee, the vial a cold promise in his pocket, fueling his determination to uncover Reed's betrayal. Kele woke to a faint scratching sound, his hand tightening on the knife as he scanned the cave's dim entrance. A small wooden carving shaped like a crow's sacred raven lay just inside, its edges freshly cut. His heart raced. Someone had been here while they slept. He crept outside, spotting unfamiliar boot prints in the mud, and his mind flashed to Gideon's men. The carving bore a single word, Reed, etched deep, sending a chill through him. Kele hesitated, fearing a trap, but the raven's symbol, a sign of warning among his people, tugged at his instincts. He tucked the carving into his pocket and returned to Awee, her fevered brow hot under his touch. Whispering a prayer to the spirits, he vowed to protect her, the mysterious Carver's message a spark of hope or danger in the darkness. Kele sat by the fire, eyes fixed on the entrance, torn between caution and the need to unravel Reed's secrets. Kele's fingers traced the carved raven, its word Reed, burning in his mind as he watched Awee's chest rise and fall weakly. He suspected the Carver was a traitor luring him to Baxter, yet the sacred symbol hinted at an ally. Awee's soft murmur, repeating her boarding school nightmares, deepened his resolve to stay hidden. He recalled Taza's tales of crow turncoats, making him question every shadow. Kele slipped the carving under a stone, deciding to ignore its call for now, and checked the cave for signs of intrusion, finding none. He hummed a crow lullaby to Awee, her face briefly peaceful but his own heart churned with doubt. The vial of poison still weighed in his sack, a reminder of the creek's betrayal. Kele knelt by Awee, whispering, "I won't trust the wrong soul," his eyes darting to the cave mouth, where the forest held secrets he wasn't ready to face. Sarah moved through the moonlit town, her cloak hiding the tremble in her hands as she approached Reed's office. She slipped inside, heart pounding, and rifled through papers, her fingers brushing a letter from Carver about unused land. Her breath caught. It mentioned safe waste dumped in the creek. She tucked the letter inside her blouse, its weight a dangerous promise. A creak outside made her dive under the desk, pulse racing as a guard's lantern swept past the window. Sarah's thoughts drifted to Kele's gentle eyes, fueling her courage to steal this proof. She eased out, the letter crinkling against her chest, and fled into the night, her mind set on finding Kele. The town's silence felt like a trap, each step risking her place among her people, but Sarah's heart beat for justice, for Awee, and for the man she couldn't name aloud. Awee's fever broke into a delirious rant, her voice echoing in the cave as she spoke of white hands that beat her at the school. Kele held her close, tears stinging his eyes as her words carved fresh wounds in his heart. She clutched his arm, begging not to be left alone, her fear a mirror of his own. He smoothed her hair, promising, "I'm here, always," though his voice cracked. Awee's gaze fixed on the cave's dripping walls, whispering about demons in the water, chilling Kele with the thought she sensed the creek's poison. He wrapped her in the blanket, her trembling easing, and recalled their childhood by the creek, now tainted. Kele's resolve hardened. He had to confront Reed's evil for Awee's sake. He kissed her forehead, her soft breathing a fragile thread, urging him to act before her strength faded completely. Kele heard the dogs before he saw them, their snarls slicing through the forest's quiet. He left Awee in the cave, grabbing a stick to draw Gideon's men away. He hurled a rock into a distant bush, the dogs lunging toward the noise, their handlers cursing. Gideon's voice boomed, "You're mine, Crow," as he fired a shot that splintered a tree near Kele. Heart-pounding, Kele sprinted through the underbrush, leading them far from Awee, his legs burning. He ducked behind a fallen log, breath ragged, as Gideon's torchlight swept close. Keel tossed another stone, sending the dogs scrambling, and slipped away, his chest tight with fear for Awee left alone. He circled back toward the cave, praying Gideon hadn't found her, the forest a blur of shadows and dread. Sarah's scream was cut short as Gideon grabbed her arm, his grip iron on the forest path. "You're with that savage," he spat, yanking her basket to find the medicine vial. He dragged her to a shed by Reed's mine, her heart hammering as she claimed it was for charity. Reed stepped from the shadows, his eyes cold, accusing her of betraying her own kind. Sarah's knees shook, but she held silent, refusing to name Kele's hiding place. Gideon shoved her inside, locking the door, his threat to ruin her ringing in her ears. She sank to the dirt floor, clutching the stolen letter, her mind racing for a way to warn Kele. Sarah whispered his name, a lifeline in the dark, her courage battling the fear of losing everything for him. Kele slipped into the Crow village at dusk, his hood low, seeking allies for Awee. He found two young men by a fire, their faces hard until he spoke of Awee's fever. One shook his head, fearing Baxter's wrath, but Kele's plea, "She's all I have," softened the other. He crept to Taza's tent, heart sinking as the elders' council argued inside. Kele whispered through the flap, begging Taza to shelter Awee, but Taza's voice was sharp, blaming Kele for the tribe's unrest. Kele offered the vial as proof of Reed's poison, but Taza demanded more. Defeated, Kele retreated, his hope fraying, the village's distrust a heavier burden than the militia's hunt. He vowed to return with answers, Awee's life the only fire keeping him moving. A twig snapped, and Kele spun, knife raised, as a figure emerged from the trees. The man, cloaked, tossed a carved wooden hawk at Kele's feet, its eyes glinting in the moonlight. Before Kele could speak, the stranger lunged, knocking a militia scout unconscious with a swift strike. He pulled Kele into a thicket, finger to lips, as Gideon's men passed, cursing their lost prey. The stranger pointed to the carving marked "Camp" and vanished, leaving Kele breathless. Kele gripped the hawk, its message clear but its sender a mystery. Was this the same Carver from the cave? He tucked it away, heart racing, and sprinted back to Awee, the stranger's aid a fleeting spark in his darkening world. Kele's trust wavered, but the carving burned with purpose, urging him toward Reed's secrets. Kele met Gideon, the crow hunter, by a hidden spring, the vial of poison heavy in his hand. Gideon sniffed it, his face grim, confirming it was mine waste, deadly to water and beast. He spoke of cattle dying after drinking from the creek, his voice low with anger. Kele's fists clenched, seeing Reed's hand in every dead fish, every sick child. Gideon agreed to help, but warned Kele to keep it secret, fearing the tribe's panic. Kele hid the vial in his belt, its weight a vow to expose Reed. He thanked Gideon, their shared rage a bond, and returned to Awee, whispering of the creek's betrayal. Her fevered eyes met his, and Kele swore to fight, not just for her, but for the land that cradled their people. Kele slipped into the village at midnight, the air thick with the scent of sage from a nearby fire. He found Taza alone, praying in his tent, and knelt, offering the vial as proof of Reed's poison. Taza's eyes narrowed, his voice cold, accusing Kele of weaving tales to dodge his shame. Kele spoke of the dead fish, of Awee's words about demons in the water, his voice breaking. Taza softened but demanded hard evidence, papers from Reed's camp. Kele nodded, heart heavy, promising to deliver. Taza gripped his shoulder, a fleeting trust, and sent him away, warning of Baxter's spies. Kele left, the vial his only weapon, Awee's fading strength and the tribe's doubt pushing him toward a fight he couldn't lose. Sarah sat shivering in the dark shed, her wrists raw from the rough rope binding them. Reed's shadow loomed as he leaned close, his voice a low growl, demanding to know where Kele hid. She pressed her lips tight, eyes defiant, thinking of Awee's fragile frame and Kele's desperate fight. Gideon paced outside, his boots thudding, muttering about teaching her a lesson, but Reed waved him off, wanting answers first. Sarah caught snatches of their talk, words like waste and creek, confirming the letter's truth. She tugged at the ropes, her fingers scraping dirt, searching for anything to cut them. Her heart ached for Kele, alone with Awee, and she whispered his name, a quiet vow to escape. The shed's damp air clung to her, but Sarah's spirit burned, fueled by the stolen letter pressed against her chest, a beacon of hope in the suffocating dark. Kele slipped back to the cave, his breath catching at Awee's still form, her face ghostly pale. He knelt, touching her burning forehead, her shallow breaths barely stirring the air. He dribbled water between her lips, but she coughed, eyes fluttering without focus. Kele's chest tightened, memories of their mother's gentle songs flooding him, now drowned by Awee's suffering. He wrapped her tighter in the blanket, whispering, "Hold on, Awee, I need you." The vial of poison in his belt felt heavier, a cruel reminder of Reed's reach. Kele carved a prayer into the cave wall, begging the spirits to spare her. His mind raced to Sarah, her kindness, his only lifeline, and he resolved to find her for medicine, the cave's silence amplifying his fear that time was slipping away. A soft thud outside the cave made Kele freeze, his hand on his knife. A new wooden carving, a wolf with camp etched on it, lay at the entrance, its eyes sharp in the moonlight. He scanned the trees, heart pounding, but saw no one, the Carver's stealth unnerving. The wolf, a crow symbol of guidance, stirred hope, yet Kele feared a trap. He tucked the carving beside the raven, their messages pointing to Reed's camp. Awee's faint moan pulled him back, her fever unrelenting, urging him to act. He traced the carving's lines, whispering, "Show me the truth," and planned a night raid, the wolf a fragile promise in his trembling hands. Kele kissed Awee's forehead, vowing to return. The forest shadows both friend and foe. Kele crept through the dark to Reed's camp, the air thick with coal, dust, and menace. He scaled a low fence, heart hammering as a guard's lantern swung close. Inside a tent, he found a crate of papers, his fingers fumbling through letters about Crowland and waste disposal. One detailed dumping poison in the creek, signed by Carter. And Kele's blood boiled. He stuffed 3 letters into his shirt, their weight a dangerous victory. A dog's bark froze him, and he ducked behind a barrel, breath shallow as footsteps neared. Kele slipped out, thorns tearing his sleeve, and sprinted into the forest, the letters a burning truth against his skin. His heart soared with proof but sank for Awee, alone in the cave, her life hanging on his next move. Gideon's shout shattered the night, his torch catching Kele's shadow as he fled the camp. "He's here!" Gideon bellowed, spotting disturbed papers and a fresh footprint. Kele's legs burned, branches slashing his face as he dove into a gully, the letters crinkling in his shirt. Gideon fired a shot, the bullet grazing a tree, and Kele's heart thundered, Awee's face flashing in his mind. He tossed a rock, sending Gideon's dog scrambling, and crawled through mud, breath ragged. Gideon found a dropped letter, his snarl echoing as he realized Kele held proof. Kele reached a stream, washing away his trail, and hid in reeds, shaking as torches passed. He clutched the remaining letters, their words a lifeline, knowing one slip could cost Awee everything, the forest alive with his hunter's rage. Reed slammed his fist on the table, Gideon's report of Kele's theft igniting his fury. He ordered Baxter to seal the forest, his voice sharp, vowing to crush the crow-rat. Reed spread lies in town, painting Kele as a land saboteur, posters with his face plastered on every wall. He doubled the bounty for Kele's capture, coins clinking in his mind. Gideon suggested burning a forest patch to smoke Kele out, and Reed nodded, eyes glinting. He met Carter in secret, promising to bury Kele before the federal papers arrived. Reed checked the mine's waste barrels, ensuring no trace remained, his laughter cold as he pictured Kele's defeat. The town buzzed with his lies, tightening the noose around Kele's fading hope. Sarah's fingers bled as she worked a rusty nail against her ropes, the shed's lock rattling as she froze. The guard outside snored, giving her a chance, and she cut free, heart racing. She slipped through the door, clutching the stolen letter, and ran across a field, moonlight her only guide. A militia horse stood untied, and Sarah climbed on, urging it toward the forest, her skirt tearing on brambles. She recalled Kele's cave, its location etched in her mind, and pushed the horse faster, dogs barking in the distance. A torch flared behind her, Gideon's men on her trail, but Sarah whispered Kele's name, her fear swallowed by resolve. She reached the forest's edge, praying she'd find him before the hunters did. Kele entrusted the 2 stolen letters to Mika, a crow trader heading to the city, his voice low with urgency. Mika nodded, tucking them into his coat, promising to reach a federal reporter. Kele scratched a note, detailing Reed's poison and Awee's plight, his hand shaking with hope. He gave Mika his last coin, gratitude in his eyes, but fear gnawed at him, the letter's journey uncertain. Awee's cough echoed in the cave, her face sunken, and Kele's heart sank, knowing time was short. He hid the 3rd letter in his boot, a backup against betrayal. Kele prayed the reporter would act, his whispered words to Awee. "Help's coming," a fragile shield against the dread that Mika might not make it. Baxter's men stormed the Crow village at dawn, their boots trampling sacred ground as they seized Taza. They accused him of inciting rebellion, cuffs snapping on his wrists as he stood silent, refusing to name Kele. Villagers shouted, held back by rifles, their anger simmering. Baxter ransacked tents, searching for Kele's trail, his voice booming threats. A young boy slipped away, carrying Taza's message to Kele. "I believe in you." Taza's calm eyes haunted Baxter, who locked him in a cell, plotting to break the elder. The militia camped by the village, their fires casting long shadows, while Taza prayed, his faith in Kele a quiet strength against the iron bars. The village held its breath, torn between fear and hope. Kele returned to the cave, his heart stopping at Awee's lifeless stillness, her breath a faint whisper. He wiped her brow, now cold, and tried to feed her water, but she choked, her eyes unseeing. Kele's tears fell, memories of Awee's laughter by the creek now a cruel echo. He held her hand, whispering their mother's stories, his voice breaking. Awee's fingers twitched, gripping his, a fleeting sign of fight. Kele tied a red cloth outside, a desperate signal for Sarah, his hope pinned on her medicine. He prayed to the spirits, begging for one more day, but Awee's fading pulse tore at him. Kele sat, the vial and letters his only weapons, the cave a tomb where love and despair battled in the flickering firelight. Sarah burst through the cave's vine curtain, her breath ragged, clutching a small vial of medicine. She saw Kele cradling Awee, his eyes red with despair, and rushed to his side, her hands trembling as she pressed the vial into his palm. "I got away," she whispered, recounting her escape from Gideon's shed, her voice shaking. She pulled the stolen letter from her blouse, its words about the creek's poison a shared hope. Kele's face lit with relief, but fear lingered as he glanced at Awee, her fever unbroken. Sarah checked Awee's pulse, her heart sinking at its faint flutter, and urged Kele to give her the medicine. She revealed she'd sent another letter to a federal reporter, her eyes fierce with determination. Kele gripped her hand, gratitude mixing with dread, knowing Sarah's defiance put her in greater danger, yet her presence was a lifeline in the cave's suffocating dark. The stranger appeared at the cave's mouth, his cloak blending with the shadows, and Kele's hand flew to his knife, heart pounding. The man raised his hands, revealing a scarred face, and said, "I worked for Carter. I know his crimes." Kelly's breath caught as the stranger, the Carver, explained his past, driven by guilt to expose Reed's poison plot. He handed Kele a rough map to a hidden shed of documents, his voice low but firm. Awee's cough broke the tension, and Kele hesitated, torn between trust and suspicion. The Carver's eyes softened, speaking of his own lost family, a pain Kele recognized. Kele nodded, pocketing the map, his resolve hardening. The Carver vanished into the night, leaving Kele staring at the map, its lines a dangerous promise, Awee's shallow breaths urging him to believe in this unlikely ally. Kele sat by the fire, the map and letters spread before him, as Sarah watched with quiet strength. He traced a plan to rally the Crow at their sacred ceremony, his voice steady but eyes burning with purpose. Sarah agreed to seek out fair-minded townsfolk, her fingers brushing his in silent support. Kele checked Awee, her fevered, mumbling a knife to his heart, and vowed she'd see the creek clean again. He carved a unity symbol on a stick, a gift for Taza, hoping to mend the tribe's trust. Sarah sketched a timeline in the dirt, their voices low, planning the ceremony's moment to reveal Reed's crimes. Kele prayed to the spirits for courage, the cave's walls echoing his whispered, "This is for you, Awee." Their plan felt fragile, but together they forged a spark of hope against the looming storm. Kele slipped into the Crow village at dawn, his hood low, the vial and letter hidden in his belt. He met 3 young warriors by a stream, their eyes wary until he spoke of Awee's suffering and Reed's poison. One nodded, swayed by Kele's plea, and promised to spread the word. Kele showed the vial, its murky contents silencing their doubts, and the letter's words fueled their anger. A second warrior vowed to bring elders to the ceremony, his fist clenched. Kele's heart lifted, but a shout from the village edge made him duck, Baxter's men nearby. He urged the warriors to protect Taza, their nods a fragile bond. Kele retreated, the villages stirring hope a warmth against the cold fear that Reed's reach could crush them all before the ceremony began. The crow ceremony began under a blazing sun, drums echoing as Kele stood before the tribe, his voice rising over the wind. He held up the vial, its poison glinting, and read Carter's letter, each word a hammer against Reed's lies. The crowd roared, elders nodding, their faces hard with resolve. Baxter's men charged in, rifles raised, and a shot cracked the air, silencing the drums. Taza stepped forward, defying Baxter, but a soldier's club struck his head, blood trickling as he fell. Kele dragged Taza to a tent, his hands shaking as he bandaged the elder's wound, whispering, "Stay with us." Baxter shouted for Kele's surrender, his men circling the ceremony, but the tribe stood firm, their chants rising. Kele's heart pounded, the vial his shield, as he faced the chaos, determined to protect Taza and ignite the tribe's fight. Sarah's heart stopped as Gideon grabbed her arm in the ceremony's crowd, his grip bruising. "You're done, traitor," he snarled, dragging her toward a wagon, vowing to end Kele's rebellion. Sarah kicked, biting his hand, her cry lost in the drums, but Gideon struck her cheek, stars bursting in her vision. A crow woman saw, her shout alerting Kele, who turned, eyes wide with fear. Sarah screamed for Kele to keep fighting, her voice raw as Gideon bound her wrists. He threw her into the wagon, his laughter cold, promising Reed would deal with her. Sarah's thoughts clung to Kele, her stolen letter still hidden, a spark of defiance in her pounding heart. She prayed he'd rally the tribe, her pain fueling her resolve to see Reed fall, no matter the cost. The Carver emerged from the dusk, his cloak catching the wind as he led Kele to a shed deep in the forest. They slipped past a sleeping guard, Kele's pulse racing as he pried open a crate, finding ledgers of waste dumped in the creek. The Carver pulled out a contract signed by Carter, its words damning, and Kele's hand shook with triumph. A twig snapped outside and they froze, crouching behind barrels as a patrol passed. Kele stuffed the papers into his shirt, their weight, a vow to save Awee. The Carver whispered of a reporter waiting in the city, urging Kele to send the proof. They fled, the shed's secrets a fragile hope, but Kele's heart sank, knowing Awee's time was slipping away. He gripped the Carver's arm, a silent thanks, the forest swallowing their steps. Carter's men doused the shed with oil, flames roaring to life as Kele and the Carver watched from a ridge, horror gripping them. The ledgers burned, their proof turning to ash, and Kele's knees buckled, despair clawing his chest. The Carver grabbed his shoulder, voice fierce, saying he knew a witness, a man who saw Carter's orders. Kele's eyes burned, Awee's face flashing in his mind, urging him not to break. He clutched the vial, its poison his last evidence, and nodded, resolve hardening. Carter's laughter echoed below, his men certain they'd won, but Kele's anger flared, a fire hotter than the blaze. He turned to the Carver, whispering, "We fight on, the loss a wound, but Awee's need a call he couldn't ignore." Sarah, bruised but unbroken, found a pastor in town, her stolen letter trembling in her hand. She spoke of Reed's poison, her voice steady, showing Carter's words as proof. The pastor's eyes widened, calling a few honest townsfolk, their faces grim as Sarah recounted Awee's suffering. She pleaded for them to join a town hall protest, her heart racing at their hesitant nods. One man feared Reed's wrath, but Sarah's story of Kele's fight swayed him. She hid the letter in her sleeve, praying it would reach Kele. The group agreed to stand with the Crow, their whispers a fragile alliance. Sarah's chest swelled with hope, her pain for Awee and love for Kele driving her to risk everything for justice. Kele knelt by Awee, her fevered breaths barely audible, as he planned the town hall protest with Sarah's message in mind. He wrote a speech, each word a vow to expose Reed, his hands steady despite his grief. The carver promised a witness, a lifeline Kele clung to, and Kele carved a crow symbol for strength, its lines deep. He checked Awee, her pulse faint, and whispered, "This is for you." Sarah's note spoke of townsfolk joining, a spark in the dark, and Kele prayed the tribe would stand with him. He tied a fresh red cloth outside, hoping Sarah would come, his heart torn between Awee's fading life and the fight ahead. Kele stood, the vial and speech his weapons, ready to face the town, Awee's love his unyielding fire. Awee's eyes fluttered open, clear for the first time in days, locking onto Kele's tear-streaked face in the cave's dim light. She squeezed his hand, her voice a faint whisper, "You'll win, Kele. I know it." A soft crow lullaby spilled from her lips, each note trembling but pure, filling Kele's heart with fragile hope. He pressed his forehead to hers, sobbing quietly, her strength a miracle amid her fading warmth. Awee spoke of a dream, a clear creek sparkling under the sun, her words a plea to save their land. She urged him to protect the tribe, her smile peaceful despite her pain. As her eyes closed, slipping back into fever, Kele clutched her hand, vowing to fight for her vision. He tied a beaded bracelet around her wrist, a childhood gift, whispering, "Stay with me." His soul tethered to her fleeting breath. The carver returned at dusk, his cloak dusted with pine needles, leading a nervous man named Loman, a former mine worker. Loman's hands shook as he recounted dumping poison under Carter's orders, his voice low with shame. He offered a vial of waste, identical to Kele's, its murky contents a grim confirmation. Kele's eyes blazed, gripping the vial, seeing Awee's suffering in its poison. The carver vowed to guard Loman at the town hall, his nod firm. Kele thanked them, his voice thick, Loman's courage a spark against his despair. They planned to present Loman's testimony, Kele's heart pounding with the weight of this new ally. He carved a crow symbol for truth on a stone, praying it would carry them through, Awee's song echoing in his mind. Kele stood at the town hall steps, the crow tribe behind him, their drums a defiant heartbeat under the noon sun. He raised the vial, voice booming, reading Carter's letter as the crowd of tribesmen and townsfolk gasped. Sarah stood with the pastor's group, holding signs, her bruised face fierce with pride. Reed stormed forward, shouting, "Lies!" his face red, but Kele held up the poison, silencing him. Gideon's men circled, rifles glinting, and a woman screamed as they pushed closer. Kele called out Awee's name, his voice breaking, rallying the tribe's chants. Sarah stepped beside him, recounting her captivity, her words sharp as knives. The crowd surged, voices rising, Kele's heart racing as the truth clashed with Reed's fading power, the hall a battlefield of hope and rage. A woman's cry cut through the chaos, and Mrs. Reed stepped from the crowd, her hands trembling, eyes wet with guilt. She confessed Reed's plan to poison the creek, her voice cracking as she handed Kele a ledger of waste shipments. The crowd hushed, stunned, as Reed roared, calling her a traitor, his face twisted. Mrs. Reed sobbed, saying she couldn't bear the sin, her words a weight lifted. Kele took the ledger, his hands steady, thanking her softly, promising safety. The tribe cheered, their unity a wall against Gideon's men, who hesitated, rifles lowering. Kele's chest swelled, Awee's dream of a clean creek closer, but his heart ached, knowing her time was slipping. Mrs. Reed's courage, a mirror of Sarah's, fueled his fire to end this fight. A man in a dusty coat pushed through the crowd, introducing himself as Ellis, a federal reporter, his badge glinting. He held Kele's letter, sent by Mika, and Sarah's, his voice calm but firm, announcing a government investigation. Ellis demanded Reed and Baxter's arrest, his words sharp, and the militia stepped back, outnumbered by the crowd's roar. Kele handed over the vial and ledger, his voice steady, recounting the Creek's betrayal. Ellis nodded, promising to publish the truth, his notebook filling fast. The tribe chanted, their hope a living thing, and Sarah gripped Kele's arm, her eyes bright with tears. Kele's heart soared, but a pang for Awee tempered his joy, her absence a shadow in the victory. Ellis shook his hand, the town hall alive with justice's first breath. Loman climbed the steps, his voice trembling but clear, detailing Carter's orders to poison the creek. He held up his vial, matching Kele's, its contents a silent accusation as the crowd gasped. Ellis scribbled furiously, vowing to indict Carter, who tried to slip away, only to be caught by townsfolk. Kele faced Carter, asking, "Why our land?" But the man's silence was his only reply. The tribe embraced, their unity a shield, and Kele thanked Loman, calling him a brother. Carter was cuffed, his empire crumbling, and the crowd's cheers shook the hall. Kele's heart pounded, the creek's future brighter, but Awee's fading pulse haunted him. He stood tall, Loman's truth a victory, yet his soul braced for the costs still to come. Kele raced back to the cave, his heart shattering as he found Awee still, her breath gone, her hand cold in his. He fell to his knees, tears streaming, clutching her, the bracelet he'd tied now a lifeless token. Awee's last words, her dream of a clean creek, echoed in his mind, a vow he'd kept too late. He carried her to the creek, singing her lullaby, its notes raw with grief. Kele buried her under a willow, carving her name into its bark, his hands trembling. He prayed her spirit would find peace, the creek's gentle flow her final cradle. Sarah arrived, her arms around him, her sobs mingling with his, sharing his loss. Kele stood, Awee's love a fire in his chest, vowing to honor her by saving their land. The crow gathered at dawn, their voices rising in a ceremony to honor Kele, the creek sparkling behind them. Taza, his head bandaged, named him guardian of the waters, his voice proud. Young warriors gifted Kele a new saddle, its beads gleaming, a symbol of trust. Kele spoke of Awee, her strength, his guide, his voice steady despite the ache. The tribe vowed to protect their land, their unity a wall against future threats. Kele's heart swelled, accepted at last, but Awee's absence was a wound. Taza placed a feathered band on Kele's wrist, sealing his place among them. Kele stood taller, promising to live for Awee's dream, the creek's song a reminder of her sacrifice. Sarah joined Kele at a tribal council, her presence stirring whispers, but Taza's firm nod silenced doubters. She spoke of leaving her town for Kele, her voice soft but unwavering, earning nods from elders. Kele took her hand, their bond a quiet defiance, his eyes warm with love. A young girl offered Sarah a wildflower, its petals bright, and Sarah's tears fell, accepted at last. They shared plans for a cultural lodge, a place to preserve crow stories, their voices hopeful. Some warriors hesitated, but Taza's blessing held firm, the tribe opening to Sarah. Kele's heart lifted, seeing a future with her, Awee's spirit guiding their path. The council ended with songs, the flower in Sarah's hand a symbol of new roots. The town hall stood quiet, the creek's clear waters reflecting a hard-won peace as Reed and Carter faced trial, their crimes laid bare. Baxter's badge was stripped, his power broken, and the tribe's land was secured, its boundaries sacred. Kele worked his saddles, each stitch a tribute to Awee, her memory a steady flame. He and Sarah began the lodge, its walls rising with crow symbols, a haven for their heritage. Kele's heart carried Awee's loss, her sacrifice the price of their victory, but her lullaby lived in him. The tribe held a ceremony for Awee, her song echoing over the creek, their voices one. Kele stood with Sarah, their hands clasped, the land safe, their love a bridge across divides. The creek flowed, pure and free, whispering Awee's name, a testament to courage and the cost of truth.